No surprise that experts are starting to ask the big question, could a nuclear war actually be about to happen? The US has been preparing for this scenario since all the way back in the 1960s, and should a war break out, it was decided, somewhat grimly, that certain states would be used as a nuclear sponge, absorbing the bulk of the opposing nuclear warheads so the country as a whole would have a greater chance to survive. And this isn't just a US plan. Similar strategies have been implemented by nuclear-bearing countries around the world. We'll get to know how the US decided which states would be put on the nuclear chopping block, but first it's best to start at the very beginning. It all began with experiments by Pierre and Marie Curie, showing that there existed elements, namely uranium and radium, that contained huge stores of potential energy waiting to be unleashed. The renowned Italian physicist Enrico Fermi then showed that he could produce vast amounts of radiation energy by bombarding uranium. With neutrons. The concept of nuclear fission materialized in 1938 when German chemists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann detected barium as a result of uranium neutron bombardment, with scientists confirming that barium was being made by the uranium atom splitting into different elements. The scientists correctly predicted that since the resulting elements contained fewer total neutrons, the reaction also produced free neutrons, which had the capacity to chain the reaction in additional uranium elements. Also, the reaction released vast amounts of energy as it removed the strong nuclear bonds that hold the atoms together. The discovery was quickly recognized as a potential tool for both energy production and destruction. But fortunately for the US and all of the Allied powers in World War II, the German physicists responsible for the nuclear developments were being actively driven out of Germany by the Nazi regime. It would take a letter from Albert Einstein to President Roosevelt on August 2, 1939, to officially alert the American government to the threat posed by nuclear weapons to both the US and the entire world. Since Einstein outlined that the German scientists had the potential to develop the nuclear bomb in the near future, the US government decided to spearhead its own nuclear research program to counter the threat. This led to the start of the Manhattan Project in 1942, one of the costliest US military and research programs of the 20th century. The Manhattan Project was ultimately considered a purely defensive measure, an attempt to create weapons that would not be used as a way to necessarily destroy the enemy, but as a show of force that would deter future aggression. Ultimately, the Manhattan Project led to the successful development of a nuclear bomb, with two functional prototypes, Little Boy and Fat Man, that were detonated above the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, killing an estimated 200,000 people. This effectively removed Japan from World War II. However, while the bombs ended up being the only examples of nuclear weapons used in combat, this was only the beginning of widespread nuclear proliferation. Suddenly, all of the world's greatest powers were vying for the technological and industrial capacity to build nuclear arms. Why did everyone want them? Well, if you didn't have access to a nuclear bomb and the other side did, you were at a significant disadvantage in any potential conflict. This created a paradoxical approach where countries would develop and stockpile significant nuclear weapons to deter other countries who had their own stockpiles into launching theirs. The nuclear strategy for many countries was ultimately referred to as mutually assured destruction, or MAD, with weapons stockpiles large enough to hopefully negate an opposing force's nuclear capacity before it could be deployed. After World War II, America emerged as one of the world's largest economies, cutting its unemployment rate from 25% before the war to just 2% after.
You want to know the key to fixing and flipping? Don't fix and flip. Instead,
and nearly tripling its GDP from $80 billion to $230 billion. The country put its economic prosperity into developing more weapons for its defense, allocating a sizable 10% of its budget to the military, a figure way above many other countries in the world, which never really stopped, although current figures are in the 4% range. This led to the US having close to 30,000 nuclear warheads in its stockpiles by 1964, compared to Russia's 5,200. This was around the same time as the Cuban Missile Crisis, which ultimately led to the US and the USSR signing the Partial Test Ban Treaty, greatly reducing the capacity for testing and therefore developing new nuclear weapons. The ban on testing bombs above ground and underwater didn't deter countries from making more nuclear weapons, though. By 1986, Russia's stockpile was close to 40,000 nuclear warheads, and while the US was decommissioning some of its own, it still had around 22,000 weapons. For reference, the 5 other nuclear-armed countries, the UK, France, China, Israel, and South Africa, had fewer than 1,000 warheads combined at the time. The main launching platform for nuclear weapons in the 20th century